Like if you're not willing to really hustle, and that doesn't just mean working a lot, that means working around the clock. You need to be willing, if somebody calls you at 8 o'clock at night and a house just hit the market, you need to show them that house. Otherwise, they're just going to call another agent. The biggest service that a good broker in commercial industrial real estate offers is information. Never underestimate the power of phone call and providing a written, well-presented monthly or periodic report. Game changer for an agent.
Today, I actually have industrial real estate's secret weapon, Mr. Chad Griffiths, in studio, and we are talking about how we have mutual connections and friends who have been on this podcast. Taylor Hack, a mutual friend. Chad just got to tour a $3 million home with him, but Chad's a commercial broker, so he got to hang out with the Rezzies, talked a little bit about our love for F1. But in today's episode, we're going to really dig into how Chad became a seasoned expert in industrial real estate with over 1,000 deals completed since 2005. He's a partner at a local firm, a co-owner of 150,000 square feet of industrial property, and he's a host of the Industrial Real Estate Show. He's a podcaster. He's an executor. He's a salesperson. He's a creator. He's a dad, just like me. I think I'm excited to learn a lot from you, Chad. Why don't we just start at the very, very beginning, though? Like, what was your journey into commercial real estate? Let's start there.
Yeah, thanks for that. And honored to be here. Thanks so much for having me as a guest. I started in 2004. Technically, I got my license in real estate and I started on the residential side. So I'd been buying and selling a few houses, trying to flip them, hadn't been overly successful, but got an itch for real estate. So 2004, got licensed, joined a residential firm. After a year or so, I just realized it wasn't exactly what I saw for myself in the long term. Still have a number of friends that are in residential real estate, and for some people it works great. For me, I just I couldn't extrapolate that out 20, 30 years and see myself doing that. So 2005, I joined a commercial brokerage. It's still at the same firm, actually. And what's so funny about it is started very new. I had no idea what I was doing. Just had an itch, really got excited about it. But fast forward 20 years now and partner at the firm. And then I also own the building that our office is in. So it's pretty cool starting from knowing nothing to now being involved in the company and owning the building. So love industrial real estate, absolute passion of mine. I live, breathe, and sleep everything to do with industrial.
I love it. I guess, what were the things about residential real estate that didn't speak to you for maybe new agents that are listening that are curious about where they should niche down?
I found with residential is it's really about hustle. Like if you're not willing to really hustle, and that doesn't just mean working a lot, that means working around the clock. You need to be willing, if somebody calls you at 8 o'clock at night and a house just hit the market, you need to show them that house. Otherwise, they're just going to call another agent. And I was fine with that when I was younger, but I just started looking, do I really want to be doing this? Do I really want to be giving away all my evenings, all my weekends, having to do this constant grind? And I know agents now that started the same time that I did, but stuck with residential. And they've developed more systems and they've tried to ease out that grind so that they don't have to work 80 hours around the clock and always on standby. But
Sure.
I just saw an opportunity in commercial, and I knew a few people that were in the industry, and it was a lot more business hours. There's a lot more business oriented. You weren't expected to have to go and show somebody a property if they called and they wanted to see it in half an hour. It wasn't that everything had to be right now. And that's what I noticed in residential, at least with the good agents. There's probably a lot of bad agents out there that aren't willing to do that. And they're like, you know what, if someone wants to see a house in 30 minutes, I'm not going to show them. That's fine. But there is an agent out there that would be like, yes, I'm going to do it. So there's really, and that's the separation in my mind. The separation between a good agent and a bad agent in residential anyways, was that the good agent was willing to just do whatever it took. And that's admirable. Like I actually have a tremendous amount of respect for people that are willing to work that hard. But that was one of the things. And also I found it to be much more of a commodity service where there's a lot of residential agents out there. So unless it had some sort of way of manifesting and keeping business and attracting business and then referrals, like a really elaborate system, there's so many residential agents out there that everybody knows one. There's someone at a church or on the baseball team or their neighbor. Like there's just so many residential agents, whereas in commercial, it's a small fraction of that. So And that was my theory. That's why I was like, there's a number of things that I'm attracted to with commercial. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I make a switch and fail. But those were kind of some of the ideas that I had on why I thought it would work. And true to form, it has been. Like one client that I have, I think I've done over 50 deals with him now. And that'd be very hard to do that 50 deals with one client on the residential side. But 50 deals with him. And then it's also all the offshoots that would have been a considerable amount of other activities. So those are kind of the things that I thought, is that I wouldn't be expected to be giving up my weekends, my holidays, my evenings to be always on call. And that has been the case. I still take calls, I still respond to emails, but me showing a property at 7, 8 o'clock at night, I haven't done it in years, or on a weekend or on a holiday. So, and then repeat business and more logical, less emotional decision making. Like some of those things that's probably a frustration for a lot of residential agents has been true as being able to remove those components on the commercial side.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we just got back from Amish country. We were in Ohio. And I said to Shannon, man, I got a ton of respect for how they live because, I mean, they wake up early, they get to work early, but they're done at 5 and nothing's open after 5 or 6 Sundays. Nothing's open. Like they actually eat leftovers because they typically do respect the Sabbath exponentially. But what I thought was interesting, I said to her was, wouldn't it be interesting if our industry operated to the same parameters? Like we could get as much done as we get done in a 24-hour window if we all had the same set of rules. But the problem is some agents will try to put standards in place of like, what is normal business hours for a real estate agent? And you can put really good parameters around that. Even the res agents, like the best res agents I know are meticulous with how they prep a listing launch and tell the other maybe greener agents how to interact with them. This is how we do showings. These are when I'm taking offers. There's one agent I can think of on the res side. He seems like a commercial guy because 48-hour irrevocability on all offers. He won't look at offers on Sundays. He won't look at offers after 5 p.m. Like he has set a standard of how he does business. But to your point, I do think the residential real estate industry as a whole doesn't have a single set of standards. It's chaotic. So I can understand the draw onto the commercial side of things. The other thing that you said that I want to highlight for the audience is the leverage point. And I always make this comparison when I'm in listing appointments where I tell people like, hey, I'm not a chair. And they're like, what do you mean, Justin? I'm like, you're not at IKEA looking at 5 different chairs, comparing Justin against the 5 other res brokers. You're hiring me and my system, which is proprietary. No other agent has my data set and what I show them I do. But I said that's very different than 9 of the other 10 agents that come in here. They're all going to show you the exact same boilerplate, 40-page listing presentation. Look at what we do for you. And it's all the same, right? Where in commercial, if you're an industrial specialist or you're a retail specialist like Roger Horvath on my team, you can have a lot more leverage because to have a depth of knowledge into a niche in commercial real estate is so valuable to the right people because all they want is to call you and you save them time and money and simplify the transaction. So when you made that switch and you got into commercial real estate, you probably had a lot of time, not a lot of skill, not a lot of money. What did you do to develop skill and start making money?
Yeah, such a great point, because you're right. I had none of those. Very fresh. I was young. I was 25 when I started. Very little money, stress. Didn't know anything about it. In fact, I didn't even expect to go into industrial. I thought going to commercial, I'd be office towers or cool shopping centers or like that sexy commercial real estate. And I knew nothing about industrial. Just so happened that our office was focused primarily on industrial. So now I was getting into an area that I knew nothing about. And exactly as you said, the biggest service that a good broker in commercial industrial real estate offers is information. And it really isn't publicly available. You can't just go onto a website and say, what are lease rates right now in this subdivision of a market in Ontario or Alberta or in the US or wherever it is. There's just no website for it. You can get very high level information. Like you could go on and get a market report that says average lease rates are $10 a square foot, but that doesn't tell you exactly what type of building that you need. The market for a building, maybe you need cranes or high ceilings or a lot of yard. That could be $15 or it could be $7. You can't find that information. So I think what a good broker in our industry does is that is what they specialize. They specialize in that local knowledge. They know all the tenants that are in the market. They know what spaces are available. They know what deals just got done, so they can give you a comparable and say this property that's very similar to yours just leased at $9 a square foot. That market just isn't that information isn't publicly available. So that's what I set out to do right at the beginning. I put myself on two different paths. I said, one, I need to be a subject matter expert in the market. So I need to know everything. I need to know every deal that happens. I need to know the details of all those deals. So digging deeper than just saying, well, it's sold at $200 a square foot. Well, what was included in that? Were there any other details that influenced that price? So I settled on that one path. I need to know everything that's happening in the market. If there's a tenant in the market, I need to know about them. Space coming available 6 months from now, I need to know about that. And the other thing I did is that I needed to be a expert on what industrial real estate is. And there's a misconception that industrial real estate is just four walls and a roof. And to some extent, that's true. But there's a huge difference between a company that needs distribution space. Maybe they're opening up a 3PL facility, or they need to warehouse some inventory. There's a huge difference between a company that needs a 50,000 square foot warehouse and a company that wants to start a machine shop and they need 5,000 square feet. So understanding all the different intricacies of what's involved in industrial real estate is so much more complex than most people would realize. And I've been studying this a lot lately. It's funny. One thing that I do now, 20 years in, I actually read way more about the industry than I did 20 years ago. So I started wanting to know everything about it. I read more about it now. And one of the things I find so fascinating, and this is true in all levels of real estate, when you really break it down, you're going to have architectural components, you're going to have legal components, you're going to have engineering components, you're going to have electrical, you're going to have all these different fields where people have spent their entire careers becoming experts in, all relate to real estate. And in industrial, it's no different. If you want to talk about power, it's a very complex topic where electricians spend 4 years getting trained and then work in the field for them to have knowledge of it. Or you could have an electrical engineer. Or if you want to talk about a lawyer's 7 years of education and then all the practice that they do. You have all these fields that are actually involved in real estate, and we're trying to be the hub to all these different spokes of how complex it is. So I started off with that in mind, is I have to know the market intimately, and I have to understand what real estate is. And that also involves, I'm not going to have all the answers, but I at least need to know what questions I need to ask. So that's kind of what I explore now. Like right now, I love reading about power and I love reading about architecture. Those are two very fascinating fields to me. But again, you're dealing with professionals that have spent their entire lives knowing that. So it's impossible to know it all. But I think there's that thirst and that passion and enthusiasm that if you really want to deliver the best service you can to your clients, you need to know those two things intimately. You need to know your local market, and you need to be an expert in what that asset class actually is.
Yeah, and there's a few points I want to kind of pull apart there. The first thing that you said that I thought is so absolutely true, and this is residential, commercial investment, it doesn't make a difference. Consumers think sold data is all the value that we provide. And maybe in the past it was a real estate agent showing up at your house, giving you a book, here's what's for sale, and then taking you on tour and opening doors. Then it was taking you on tour and telling you what the neighbor's house sold for. Now that's all public information. I always say sold data is great. Interpretation of that sold data is what you actually pay me for. Because what you said, when you talk about the data that's available with commercial real estate, what the average net rents are, what the additionals are, how deals are structured. When I'm talking to a commercial tenant, a lot of times what I'm actually talking to them about is the net effective rate we're going to get them. What did that deal have in terms of inducements that is reflective on the rate that they actually got? How long a term were they putting in? How much money did the landlord put into that building for them versus how much capital did they inject? Was there a partnership deal structured on the back end? Like, there's so many complexities that you can't put on the MLS, which is why I think in commercial real estate, a well-educated agent is worth their weight in gold and will pay themselves off tenfold. Same as when you get a good designer, a good architect, a good builder, a good accountant, a good mechanic. All of these things, all of these craftsmen will bring more value than they take in a transaction. Unfortunately, we're in an industry where the consumer just looks at real estate agents and thinks that they're all built equal. I love how you extrapolated, really digging into the craftsmanship of what you do. There's one question I had when it comes to being the hub, and you addressed it, but I want to ask a little bit more in-depth question. When you're talking about architecture and you're talking about electrical engineering and these topics that other people will spend a lifetime studying as their craft, where do you draw the lines in terms of your boundaries of representing yourself as a professional? Because one of my agents asked me this today, and he said, listen, I'm trying to broker the deal and keep everybody happy. The tenant's kind of upset about some of the construction. The owner just wants to get the estoppel sign. We just want to get the deal done. And I said to him, you're not a lawyer. Don't play one on TV. You're not a construction guy. Don't play one on TV. And you're not the tenant. We're the concierge. We're the hub. So how do you know your place in a transaction? And I guess, how did you come to know your place in a transaction?
Yeah, love it. And I think I look at it almost from the standpoint, I've said this to people as well, is never put anything in writing that you wouldn't want to have read in court. Well, never say something in a deal that you wouldn't want to have repeated in court. So exactly to your point, we're not lawyers. The last thing I want to do is hold myself out as a lawyer and make a claim that perhaps lands me in court. Because I think in real estate, where we're in a commission-based industry, the only thing worse than working for free is working for free and getting sued. And even if you can successfully defend yourself and maybe you have insurance that covers it, the stress and the anxiety and everything that comes with it is never worth the cost. And in 20 years, I've never once been sued. And that to me is indicative of the fact that I never want to hold myself out as an architect. I never want to say, I don't even want to claim what power is. And I've studied power a lot over the last year. I still wouldn't say to a tenant that power here is 200 amp, 3-phase, 480 volt. I still won't even say that. I still want to have an outside electrician or the landlord or somebody confirm that. Because if I say that, and using power as just a loose example, sometimes the panel can say something. They might say it's a 200 amp panel, but there's scenarios where it might be a 200 amp panel, but a lazy electrician just repurposed an old panel and it's really only a 100 amp service in there. It's rare, but that can still happen. And why would I want to expose myself to that risk where there's professionals that this is what they do for a living? So I will never make claims on anything. And I think that's where being an effective hub is important. Is all I want to do is I want to know what questions to ask. Because if I don't know what questions to ask, that's when I've got a blind spot. That's when I can miss something. My interest in knowing as much as I can about these is just to know that these are issues. I don't want to solve any of these issues. I don't want to solve a legal clause. I don't want to misinterpret something that's in an insurance provision because I'm not an expert in any of those. So I think my job and what makes a broker effective is being able to piece all this together, put all the pieces of the puzzle together to get a deal done. But I'm not making any of these pieces. I'm just the guy overlooking it saying, okay, if we put all these here together, but I need experts to give me the actual pieces.
Yeah, I literally did a team training on Tuesday. I wish you were there to actually say that, because I told them, like, know your place. We're not the ones that are supposed to be drafting plans for how they're going to build this office out, because we don't know. We're not architects, right? But we know really good architects. People pay us for our database, and for me to be able to pick up the phone and get them a great designer and get them a great electrician and get them great contractors and environmental auditors and the right team. I think that's where some agents do get it wrong, because they're so excited about getting the deal done. They get commission breath. They say or do anything, and then they also end up in court. I sat on professional standards for 5 years, and I saw most complaints came from misrepresentation of fact, either in writing or that were said, just like you said, and they ended up in court. One thing I do have a question for you. Actually, I'm going to feature you on the vlog. So I'm filming this on the back end. That is Chad Griffiths. We're on the Prime People podcast, and this vlog is all around how agents make mistakes or how they can effectively communicate with their clients better. So I wanted to ask you that question. What do you think agents do right? And what do you think agents do wrong when it comes to communicating with clients?
Is a great question. And I think what comes to mind right away is that inexperienced or new agents think that they need to have an answer for everything. And they try to come up with an answer. And sometimes it might just be a guess. Sometimes it might be something that they heard. So it could be a market statistic, like who just moved in across the street from here. And this is applicable for residential, applicable to commercial, anything. And they just take a guess, like, oh, I think it was that machine shop that just moved in there. So instead of saying, oh, it's a good question, let me find out and I'll get you an answer back, they try to answer every question. And I think that's just a tendency of what a lot of inexperienced or new agents do, when you don't need to have every answer. I think it's great the more answers that you have. If you happen to anticipate those questions and said, okay, this, I know that this company is sensitive to what other businesses are in the area. Maybe they're a machine shop. They don't want to have a competitor right across the street. So you went and did a little bit of research in advance. I think that's great value add that you bring as a broker. But in the absence of having that, if you're just placed in a position where you don't know the answer, the best thing you can do is say, great question. Let me confirm that for you and I'll get back to you, and then actually do it, because that's the other part too, is there's a lot of lip service that gets paid and then there's not a lot of follow-up. So that does take time. Whatever the question is, it's going to take time to get the correct answer, but following up with that in a nutshell, like, that's a very simple explanation on like good versus poor agent. Is the poor agent tries to answer every question and perhaps guesses, and hopefully they get it right. But again, you're putting yourself in a position where you're open for risk. So I think to some extent, as agents, we need to be in the risk management business ourselves. And I never want to be saying something that's incorrect. I just that to me is a non-starter. Say, I'll get that answer for you, figure out what the answer is and communicate it. And people understand that. I've bought and sold lots of things myself as a principal, and I don't expect people to have the answers. But if I ask a question, I expect to get the answer. So that's like a real quick, obvious one.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown. Actually, as I'm thinking of that pragmatically too, you're also losing the opportunity to learn, because when somebody asks me a question, I may think I know the answer because I've had the question before and maybe I sourced it. Quite often, I'll even tell them like, "Well, in this one instance, this happened, but the laws maybe have changed. I don't know, right? Like we change conservation laws all the time up in my territory. The lake levels are always going up and down, and we do a lot of lakefront real estate." And that's something that like I'll never answer a question on until I talk to the conservation authority, because they may be working on a new plan that I didn't know about. And it gives me the opportunity to get new information and then also show my client what it's like to work with me. You touched on something else there that a lot of agents get wrong. When I have a new lead come in, I'm typically not doing the actual full qualification appointment. I'm qualifying them in like 5 minutes. I'm showing them what it's like to work with me. The real magic is the follow up. Like if I tell them I'm going to call you back and I'll have a couple properties for you off market for us to discuss, and maybe a longer 15, 20-minute meeting where we can ascertain where are they at financially, what's their plan, are they building a portfolio, are they working with an agent, are they open to an exclusive mandate? Then if I don't follow up with them, I'm just another agent, because most agents don't ever follow up. But if I follow up with them, I have 3 properties that are off market that are exactly what they told me they had in the first meeting. I'm ready to follow up on everything I said in that first 5-minute conversation. My chances of developing a client relationship are like 90+%, because you know this. How many agents in the industry actually follow up on promises they make clients? I don't think it's very many.
I think it's very low. It reminds me of a real estate cliche, and we probably all have heard a variation of this, or of some sort, but fortunes in the follow-up. And I think that really is true, because exactly as you said, there's a lot of people that will say that they'll do it, but either they're not great at organizing information, or they don't have a good CRM, or whatever the excuse is, they don't get to it. But the fortune is in the follow-up. So yeah, perfect example. I completely agree with what you said there.
On that note, I'd be curious just to pick your brain. Like when you have an active, do you do a lot of listings, like managing industrial listings?
A ton.
How many listings do you carry like at any one time approximately?
So I've got a team. So I've got a partner, and then we've
Okay.
got 2 junior associates, and then a team coordinator. So it'll sound like a big number, but we're a pretty sophisticated team. At any given time, we have about 80 listings. So it's a lot of data, but we've got a very sound structure in place that's taken a lot of time to build. So we just added our team coordinator 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So it's been a system that's taken a long time to build. But yeah, at any given time, about 80 listings.
And then that team coordinator, I guess, what's their role within the organization?
Working just for our team,
Yeah.
and it's managing all of our back end paperwork and files and conveyancing, and uh, keeping everything organized. So that's basically her job, is just making sure
Hitting
that.
the dates, right? Making sure that everybody has what they need to have so the team can focus on the relationships. The other question I had for you was, when you're managing 80 listings and 80 clients that want, like, they're hiring you just so they can focus on running their businesses, how do you keep them updated on their properties on a regular basis so you have raving fans as clients that feel like you're on it?
Yeah, it's funny you say this because I've selling a car and I hired a guy to market it for me, and it kind of a new service for an idea. And I'll get to your question in a second here, but I
Sure.
think this ties into it quite naturally. So it's very similar. He's an agent and he goes and sells cars, and I just thought, let's let him handle all that stuff. He's going to have contacts and systems, same thing that we would say at a different level. He hasn't communicated with me, and I start asking questions like, is he actually marketing this? Like, is there nobody interested in this? And I say to myself as I'm asking those questions, are other people saying that about my services? And I think you hit the nail on the head. How do you get raving fans? And ideally, you need to be communicating with clients regularly. I try to call clients as often as I can, because even if he had just called me and said, "Hey, no activity, but here's what I'm doing right now," then at least then I'm not asking these questions. I'm not saying, "Is he actually doing anything, or is he just working on other things that are perhaps more exciting to him?" But if he called and just said, Here's the update," all of a sudden I stop asking those questions. So I think communication is just first and foremost what you need to be doing. Call clients. It's a lost art. We seem, I think you and I are probably similar ages, but it's younger agents seem to have lost the appetite to call, and they think that they can just send a DM or they can send a text or they can send an email. And don't underestimate the power of a phone call. Calling someone and having a 10-minute conversation with them and just giving a high level update, or perhaps going into a specific thing, or even giving a market uh, point, just saying, "Hey, no activity, but there's a property that's sold in your neighborhood. I just thought I'd share that with you real quick." Power of phone call is so important. And then I'd also say we send out regular reports as well. So it'll be a monthly report where our team coordinator compiles all the information. So uh, inbound calls, if we had any outbound calls that converted into interest, if we had any tours, any potential offers that came in, we document everything. So our CRM is has become very sophisticated, where we can track all of it to each individual property and put out a report pretty easily. So we try to do that once a month, unless there's nothing to report on, then that's a phone call. But that first and foremost, I'd say phone call is that communication is so important, and it's been so valued. And then if you can put something on paper as well, a lot of the times we'll be dealing with perhaps an institutional owner, and I could have a call with the main contact, but that report might get circulated to an entire division. It might get circulated to the VP. It might get circulated to the property manager. There's so many people that will see that report that I think you have to do those in tandem. You have to have something on paper where you can have a report where people are going to see it and they can keep it on file and they're going to remember it. But do the phone call as well. Phone call and a monthly report, or even a weekly report. I have some clients that want weekly reports. If you do those in tandem and you're having honest, forthright conversations and communicating what's happening, you're buying yourself such goodwill, and you're probably buying yourself longer on the listing. Because if I go full circle on this, if the guy that I'm using to sell the car, if he came to me in 3 months, and I don't even know what contract we had on this, if there's an extension, but he came to me and said, we should renew it. And I'm thinking, I haven't even talked to you in 3 months and you haven't even brought a single buyer or anything.
Sure.
Am I going to go with that guy again? I don't know. But if he called all the time and gave me reports, no brainer. If he's like, "Hey, here's everything that I'm doing. Can you give me another month or two to see if I can uncover some buyers?" Of course, I'm going to do it. So never underestimate the power of phone call and providing a written, well presented monthly or periodic report. Game changer for an agent.
Yeah, I love it. I said in the last vlog I shot, actually, we work so hard at what we do that the biggest mistake that we've ever made is not telling our clients what we're doing. Because if we don't, they assume we're doing nothing, which I actually don't blame them. Like, the only
Mhm.
pain I felt in my career is relationships where I under communicated. I've never been fired for over communicating in my life, but I always take it as an opportunity to improve. Right? There's one client I can think of specifically where we moved heaven and earth to make things happen on a transaction, packed their property with 70 people. We did a mastermind. We bring in people like you, people in our network. You couldn't even park in their driveway. And this is at a time when there wasn't any showings happening at high price point properties. We sold the property a week later because we created so much excitement around it. But there was one simple thing on closing date where there wasn't something communicated. I wasn't there physically in person. And I said to her, I appreciate the fact that you're willing to tell me this. And now we're going to dig in deeper and really build a better relationship. And we're going to bolt something onto our system so that that doesn't get missed again. And I think it's not a bad thing to address things in your business that can be a game changer, because now we're going to do more business together. My other clients are going to be even happier because they're going to be over communicated with. But I think you really have to look at what the clients want and then try and customize it to them. And I guess the follow-up question I had for that, you kind of addressed, but I'll dig in one more time. When you deal with certain people, like I heard billionaires don't even ever pick up the phone. It's only text. Institutional guys, like you said, they have a team for a reason. Their time is very valuable. And then you have the mom and pop guy that owns his own building that maybe wants a daily call. How do you assess how somebody wants to be communicated with? I think I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think it would be a lot of just intuition. But as you say that, though, there's nothing wrong with asking the person, and that can be part of your proposal. Is just say, I'll tailor my communication around what you want. So you tell me if you want to call weekly, then happy to do that. If you want a monthly update and you just want it by a text message, that's fine too. I still would say call. Even if somebody is saying that they don't, like using the billionaire as an example, the billionaire is probably not making those decisions. The billionaire probably has somebody on his team that's overseeing those, and maybe he signs off on it. But I can't imagine really wealthy people being
No, the intricacies, right? Yeah.
yeah, I've got some very wealthy people in our market. They all would pick up their phone and talk deals because that's what they're doing. If it's just a billionaire that owned a one-off property, yeah, he probably isn't interested in doing it. But the billionaire that built his wealth on a real estate portfolio, he wants to talk to everybody because he's constantly looking for intel and looking for an edge. So I know what you're saying, and I think that is a great point. I think that you really do want to identify what their preference is, but I would still double down on the power of a phone call.
Do you use a lot of social media, like Instagram or any of those? I know you do the podcast, obviously, but are you doing tons on social media these days?
I do. Podcast is probably the main thing that I do,
Yeah.
but I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. Uh, Very little on Instagram. Podcast and LinkedIn and Twitter would probably be the ones that spend more time on.
Yeah, LinkedIn would be huge for you for sure. I know the reason I ask you that is more to just give you something that I do that works very well. Instagram's a primary for me because a lot of my guys, builders, developers, they're on Instagram. I actually DM them on that platform and I communicate with them there because quite often now Instagram looks at us and is like, oh, they like each other. They actually respond to each other's messages and we show up in each other's feeds more often. So it keeps us more top of mind. But we actually have a special guest, Mr. Roger Horvath, the flying realtor, just popped in. Roger's actually the reason you're on the show. He sent me your profile originally. He's a retail commercial expert at Prime. I know he is flying the air ambulance today. But Roger, meet Chad Griffith, and I'd love to connect you two and have you ask him some questions.
Absolutely. Can you hear me now, guys? Sorry, it's a bit
Yeah.
loud.
Hey, Roger.
Hey, Chad. How are you? I really enjoy your podcast, and I love that you're putting the closed doors of commercial real estate out into the world to to actually find some fans. I think that you'll find that there's a lot of investors that would love to get into industrial, and I think your content is just amazing. So kudos to you for that.
Well, I greatly appreciate that, and thanks for introducing me to Justin as well. It's also very much appreciated.
Absolutely, it was a no-brainer that you guys get together because the content you both put out is truly amazing. So I apologize, I missed some of the content earlier, but I had a question on the market and where you think industrial condos are going in Canada.
Yeah, I love this topic as well, and I think condos are a very underappreciated element of the industry. And what a lot of people might not even know is that you have the ability to take a building and condominiumize it, essentially very similar to the residential market. And I'm actively working on a project like this right now, actually, where it's a 27,000 square foot building and we condominiumized it and we're selling them off kind of like 2,500 square foot bays. I think that there's a huge market for it, especially in existing buildings, because the cost of construction right now, and the reason why we haven't seen a whole lot of new inventory hit the market, almost everything that's been built on the industrial side has been large big box warehouses. So 200, 300,000 square foot buildings designed for a single tenant or perhaps a few tenants. There's been very little actually built on the smaller side, because you have to add firewalls, you have to add new unit heaters, you have to add new overhead doors, washrooms for each bay. It's just so much more expensive to build per square foot on a smaller individual bays versus a 200,000 square foot building. So there's been very little inventory actually added. And if you go into almost any market right now in North America and you want to find a 3,000 square foot industrial condo, you're going to have a few options to choose from total. Whereas if you're going to a market right now and you want a 200,000 square foot warehouse, you've probably got a lot of options, at least in some markets. So that condo market has just been underserviced, undersupplied, huge amount of demand for it. As population grows, you start needing more of everything. You need the new HVAC companies, you need new electricians, you need new flooring companies. All these small companies that service the public, they are growing, and there's more and more of them every day, yet that inventory has been relatively fixed. So I love it. The first property I ever bought, actually myself, I bought a property, first one in 2014, was a small industrial condo. I bought a 2,000 square foot condo that was leased to a company that serviced a kitchen equipment. I still own that bay. 10 years later, I still actually own that bay. So I'm a big fan of industrial condos. Long story short, I'm a big fan of it.
No, I love it. That's a great market cap. I think there's definitely room to grow. Would you say that it's more in the buy and purchase, or for leasing? Do you think there's a market for leasing a smaller, condo, industrial condo? What are your thoughts on that?
It's very similar. There hasn't been a lot of inventory added either for people to purchase or to lease. And right now I've got a pretty big portfolio of properties that we have listed, and I don't have a single bay under 5,000 square feet, not a single one available for lease. So there's options available, a few of them, but it's still very difficult finding a good property at a good price right now. So if it's a company looking to get into space, I'm a big proponent that there isn't necessarily a reason to purchase over leasing, nor is there a reason to lease over purchasing. I think companies need to make the best decision that they can for themselves at that individual time. And that it varies. Sometimes it might make sense to lease. Sometimes it might make sense to purchase. If a company has a lot of money sitting on the sidelines right now and they want to enjoy the benefits of owning their own property, it can be a good time. But one thing I've said to people as a lot as well is that some companies say that they only want to purchase. They're tired of giving their landlord money and paying their landlord's mortgage and all the sayings that we're familiar with. We hear that all the time, and there's some merit to that. I'm not arguing one way or the other, but all too often the company that says that they only want to purchase, they might be overlooking a property that would actually make better sense for their business that's only available for lease. So that's where I go back to the point is make the best decision for your business. Sometimes that might make sense to actually lease. If there's only one property available to purchase, but there's 20 available for lease, and one of them would be closer to your customers and it'd work better for your staff to get to, and it's closer to public transit and it's more affordable, deciding to only purchase is short-sighted in my mind. So I think that there's opportunities for investors if they wanted to buy property and then lease it out, or if they want to buy a property and they want to resell it. And for tenants or companies that want to purchase, I think there's opportunities there as well. But I'd say it really depends on understanding where they're at that particular time and getting a better sense of what their end goal is, and then what's available at that given time as well.
Thanks a lot, Chad. That's great insight. I'm going to pass it back to Justin. I'm going to take off, and appreciate you coming on.
Oh, Roger,
are you literally taking off?
I might be. If the phone rings, we're going to run out here and start this thing up. So
I don't know if this is legal, but actually Chad and I were talking. So Taylor Hack and Chad are buddies. They were actually just together recently. And Chad was in my Bronco for an episode of Estates, Entrepreneurs, and Expressos, where we typically go in a vehicle and tour properties. see if Roger can get us in a helicopter one day and do an episode with Chad flying around looking at some commercial real estate. I think that would be awesome.
I love it. I love it.
That'd be
Let's set it
so
up, guys.
cool. I love it.
Thanks again, guys. I'll talk to
Unreal.
you.
Have a great day, Roger. Take care.
Hey, Roger.
Yeah, he's an absolute beauty. And I love that. I think the world we live in today is amazing that we can be connected from a global perspective. Feels like you're a brother from another mother already. I wish we had hours to dig in because I have so many more questions. Everybody listening, please go check out his podcast if you're interested in commercial real estate at all. I would definitely encourage you to check out what Chad is doing. I guess I'll leave you with one last final question. You're in the podcast space, so you've probably heard this before, but if you had a giant billboard that you can put out there for the entire world to see, or a brand new commercial real estate agent getting into the industry, what would that billboard say?
I love it. That's a great question. I think I would want it to be short and succinct. Respect. I'm a marketer at heart too, so you can't have a whole bunch of text on there. It's got to be like a thumbnail. I think it just something to the effect of everything about industrial real estate, and that's what I really try to do on my podcast. Is anything and everything to do with industrial real estate. I try to bring on guests that can speak to that, and it can be people that I disagree with. It can be people that I don't know anything about. I just really am on a mission to cover everything that I can for people that are interested in the industry and want to learn more about it. That's what my mission is. So that's, as I try to formulate that in my head, everything industrial real estate is probably what I'd go with.
I appreciate that. So everybody, make sure that you check out Chad's podcast, connect with him. If you learned anything, drop it in the comments. I have a feeling that we're going to meet in person at some point in time. You'll see him again on this channel. But Chad, thanks for making time for the Prime Nation.
That was awesome. Thanks, Justin. Really appreciate it.
All right. See you, brother.